Hello everyone, my name is Ben and welcome back to PASSTHEauxCORD, a channel where this is Carousel. And today we're going to be talking about the 20th anniversary of the debut album by Linkin Park, Hybrid Theory. So I've made it very clear a couple different times on the channel here that Linkin Park is my favorite all-time band, and the band that is the reason that I like music to this day. But it is of note that the 20th anniversary edition of Hybrid Theory is an actual album that came out, and it's something that I'm very interested in talking about, so we're going to on here. I figure it's a good topic that, at least this way I can kind of review something for you guys, something new, kind of in a format in which I usually would. So first we're gonna talk about this 20th anniversary edition, and then we're gonna talk about what this album and especially this band kind of means to me. So this is a 6-disc kind of set thing we got going on here, at least in the physical versions, but it's also broken down with the little indicators on Spotify. You'll know what I'm talking about. Disc 1 of this thing is obviously the actual album. I mean, it would not really make a lot of sense to not be the album. And then disc 2 is Reanimation. I guess I thought it was kind of interesting that they decided to bundle these things together. I always thought of Reanimation as its own separate project, but at the end of the day, it is remixes of Hybrid Theory, mostly anyways. It's remixes from that era of songs, so it kind of fits. But the more exciting things start happening on disc 3, which is a remastered version of the Hybrid Theory EP, the EP that came out while they were still called Hybrid Theory, and that wasn't just the name of the album. A few obsessive people like myself are very, very familiar with this EP and its contents in the former state, and may even have some favorites among the tracks here. But either way, whichever side of things you stand on, these songs sound really nice the way that they're remastered here. Some of the songs, like Step Up and Carousel, did end up seeing semi-official releases on B-sides of discs and so on and so forth, so they sound pretty much the same as you'd be used to. But then you have moments like And One, where before it kind of just sounded like it very well may have been recorded on a toaster oven and then mixed on a washing machine and somehow outputted into a digital format. And hearing the full outro on Part of Me is really interesting to me. It's essentially just the same sound for like 6 minutes, but then you've got this little instrumental cut at the end. I never knew this version of Part of Me existed. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with this outro existing in the way that it is. I just remember that I used this like super bootleg MP3 site when I was like 10, and that was one of the songs that I found on that very bootleg site. I thought that it was one of the cuts from the actual Hybrid Theory album for the longest time, and it blew my mind to find out that Part of Me wasn't even on there. Overall, I'm really, really satisfied with this remaster. I like it a lot, and the only thing that's kind of weird about it is that the order was usually placed a lot differently. I guess I remember Carousel being the closer, and then And One being the opener, for example. But the inclusion of the little technique skit thing, not really skit, but like instrumental interlude thing, was really cool. I actually wasn't familiar with that. Either that or I forgot about it over time. It's kind of like a predecessor for things like Cure for the Itch. B-Sides and Rarities is disc 4, and I think out of the 3 that are on the back end here that are kind of just compilations, this was the worst one they could have chose to press to vinyl, and yet it's the one they did. There's way too many live performances when you could have just put actual songs that were previously unreleased on here. This just makes me sad that, there's still nowhere that I can find QWERTY and Blackbirds on a streaming service, but you have a bunch of kind of filler, I guess, live tracks everywhere. The few that are on here are My December, Step Up, High Voltage, and It's Going Down, which is only kind of a B-side to a Linkin Park song. It's really a single from the Executioners, but we'll let them have it. All but Step Up of those you could find on streaming platforms already, so it ends up becoming kind of unexciting. But of course these tracks are really nice, and I suppose it is pretty nice to have them on wax now, so pardon me for thinking this way, but it would have been really cool to get more of the unreleased songs and not the like 4 B-sides that everybody already knows. I guess I'm struggling to see where the rarity part comes in. Either way, of course the live performances on here are incredible. They always were with Linkin Park, let's be real. Especially this early stuff when everybody was kind of at their peak as far as performances went. Points of Authority near the end on here is really solid. I love that one. And the Marilyn Manson remix of By Myself is a really solid way to close out the record, since that wasn't necessarily put on like the regular versions of Reanimation. It's kind of nice to see it popping up here. And even the rock remix of One Step Closer is kind of cool to see on here, even though I really wish it was the demo version of One Step Closer called Plaster, which didn't actually end up on here for some reason. Disc 5, LPU Rarities, kind of seems like an extension of the last one. LPU Rarities refers to tracks appearing on these little LPU CDs they did every year for the kind of fan club they had called Linkin Park Underground. There was 16 of these, and it really just further makes me wish that some of the live performances ended up on their own compilation despite their appearances here. Although they do make a little bit more sense being on this disc, considering that a lot of the LPU stuff contained many live tracks and or demos. There was a heavier focus on demos, of course, but live tracks are on all of them somewhere. There are a lot of really cool demos on this 5th disc that I like a lot, and hearing different lyrics on a Linkin Park song than what ended up on the album is always going to be really weird. It just kind of catches you off guard, especially if you ended up knowing every lyric of the album. I am really glad that Dedicated ended up on this disc, because Dedicated is a really good LPU track for sure, one of my favorites. But that doesn't necessarily justify the fact that so many good LPU songs are still missing. I mean, look at Standing in the Middle, QWERTY, already mentioned Blackbirds before, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here and say that a lot of those might end up on the 20th anniversary of Meteora instead. Very possible, could happen. Maybe they're just trying to take stuff specifically from that era and put it onto this compilation, this 20th anniversary. Even though none of these ended up on Hybrid Theory, maybe they're just kind of trying to take things from that time frame and earlier. That's the benefit of the doubt I can give them. And disc 6 is where shit gets really cool, at least in my eyes. It's called Forgotten Demos, I think, but it's mostly a disc of remastered Zero stuff, and Zero is the name that they had even before Hybrid Theory being the name of the band. They formed with Mark Wakefield instead of Chester originally, so you hear him on vocals. Mike is still here, but he sounds like an infant in comparison to their later stuff, and it's kind of entertaining. I like it a lot. He still has the same like presence, but his voice sounds way different. And maybe I'm a little bit weird, but I've always found the original Zero tape that was uncovered years after its existence and just kind of re-uploaded in a ripped fashion. I always found it pretty entertaining though. I like listening to that set of earlier versions of Linkin Park songs, but barely resembling them at the same time. I liked it enough that when I used to do YouTube in a different fashion entirely, Stick and Move was actually my outro song. And back then, all of the songs sounded like actual gravel. There was no studio mastering going on there, alright? They did their best in probably a garage and called it a day. And if I remember right, I've read something that says it was recorded in one of their bedrooms with very rudimentary equipment and recording devices. So there wasn't really a lot that you could do with the fact that it sounded really, really rough around the edges considering that fact. To go back to Stick and Move, the version that ended up on this compilation is way different than I was expecting, because they appear to have scrapped that original version considering just how rough it sounds, in favor of a different version that actually hasn't been released to my knowledge before this point. This is probably the most interesting track on the whole thing because I don't think it existed before this, and it's a redone version of that track with Chester as the vocalist. I have no idea when this happened. It really could have happened at any time, but it was probably shortly after they got him back as a vocalist, and maybe this was supposed to end up on Hybrid Theory or at least the EP, but never did. Mike sounds so much more into his verses on this version. I mean, all of the instrumental sounds a lot better. Of course, there was probably some remastering going on there, but I think the performances are way better. It just keeps the original structure of the song and does so much more with it. Really great stuff. It's also of note that a couple songs on here that just didn't end up landing on any other project that I was actually unaware of are on here too. She Couldn't is a song that I did know before and was pretty well known as one of their, unreleased songs. Definitely a fan favorite to some. And this track is pretty cool. It's good to see it ending up here. But Pictureboard and Could Have Been are ones that I was unaware of entirely, and I'm glad to hear them now, because pretty good tracks. And then there's some demos, much like the one before it, but these demos are in a completely different capacity here, because these end up being pretty much totally different in structure. There ends up being entire verses or entire sections that have different lyrics. There's instrumental progression that ends up being completely different. Isol, for example, which ended up being A Place for My Head later on, actually is really killer. The breakdown portion on that one is a lot heavier than the version that ended up on Hybrid Theory, and I think that's pretty cool. So, still, I wish that some more underground and or unreleased stuff ended up on some of these discs, but like I said before, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that it will be on later 20th anniversary stuff for the other albums. I know that a lot of the unreleased songs that a lot of people like, I'm thinking, Across the Line, maybe Blackbirds might have been somewhere in that era, we're like Minutes to Midnight, so maybe those wouldn't even be fit for the Meteora one. We'll have to see. We got a few years yet, but they're coming in the next decade. But yeah, in general, they really spoiled us with this last disc, in my humble opinion. This is some really good shit. I never would have thought that I would have 0 on streaming services, but here we are. 2020 is truly something strange. So I think that this 20th anniversary version could have been a greedy shilling and ended up being a lot more tasteful and a lot more graceful, I guess, with its presentation. Sure, you've got a $200 box set, but none of this actual content is behind a paywall. They generously put this out pretty much everywhere. You can find it wherever you want, and it's kind of sad that I have to say that's generous, but in the current day and age, you would almost expect this sort of thing to be paywalled. Everything they decided to remaster on here is things that I have been wanting to see as a fan for years. Seeing care put forth to Hybrid Theory EP and even beyond that, 0, is super cool in my eyes. I'm very glad to see it. Wow, alright, so that was a lot of nerding out about this compilation and old Linkin Park stuff. So I hope you all bared with me, or at least skipped ahead to this portion. Even more than I thought I'd do, actually. But now I want to say a few things about what this album and what this band means to me. I've made it no secret that Meteora, the one right up there on the left side of my head, is my favorite album of all time. And I've also made it no secret, and said it earlier in this very video, that Linkin Park is the band that got me into music. It's just that Meteora happens to be the one that had the most impact on me and happens to house my favorite songs from them. But I mean it when I say that every song on Hybrid Theory is still very important to me. Growing up, I went through a lot of bullshit. That's not something that I get into on here. I don't really like to get super personal, I guess, on this channel, but I'm just going to put it like that and, let you imagine whatever you may. I'm just going to say that a lot of bad things happened in my childhood. And from the ages of about 10 to 14, this band was the only thing keeping me sane. They were the only band I listened to for a very long time, maybe a longer time that's healthy for any person to listen to a certain amount of songs. But that's probably why I know just about everything that they've ever released to any capacity, and have listened to all of these songs way too many times already. So to call Hybrid Theory my second favorite is nothing to scoff at in any way. I still listen to this entire album front to back hundreds, thousands probably of times. Just individual songs from it, all adding together, that is. I don't think that I've sat through the entire thing front to back thousands of times, but when you take into consideration how much I've listened to each song on its own, it's probably up there. Every one of those tracks meant something to me a lot of times, and still does to this day. I still return to their music pretty often. But if it wasn't for these first two records, as I said already, too many times probably, I never would have appreciated music. And the butterfly effect of liking this band is so huge, is just boggling to think about. First, immediately, like I said, how would have I coped with things without an outlet when I was much younger? I don't know. I don't want to know the mental state that it would have affected me in to this day, but I'd probably be a lot worse off. But as you start to reach out further than this, almost everyone that I'm close to in my life is there because I either liked Linkin Park specifically or liked music, and because of Linkin Park, I liked music. So essentially, listening to Linkin Park is the reason that I have all of my friends, anybody that I'm close with that isn't actually related to me. The most direct one is my longest running friendship. I was wearing this zip up Linkin Park hoodie that I got right here, and he saw me in the hallway in 8th grade. And that is why we're friends, because he liked the band, I liked the band, and now you already got things to talk about. And that's why him and I got our first tattoo together to commemorate the 20th anniversary of this album. I'm not going to show you it on camera right here because I got like the healing ointment on it and it's partially covered up, and I'm just trying to heal it really well, but because of that it looks kind of weird, and the lighting is kind of ass in here, let's be real with ourselves. But I'm popping up a picture over there that you can already see. It's the same except red, and it's genuinely one of the coolest experiences I've had with anyone, and if I had it to redo, I would redo it 100 times over again the same way. And really, even though this is my second favorite from the band, branching back to some of the stuff that I said before, Meteora never would have happened without it, or at least wouldn't have happened to the capacity that it did. So essentially, I have Hybrid Theory to thank for my favorite album even existing. This album is Linkin Park in a way, so really we have it to thank for the entire band's existence to the capacity that it is. So now that I've gone on this very long tangent, you know why I'm not sitting up here critiquing this. Obviously that would be very biased. So I'd never be able to do that, because that would mean I'd have to find flaws in it, and that would not be good on my psyche. And it probably, at the end of the day, still wouldn't end up being a unbiased opinion. So I felt like there was not really any point in trying to give this a review. I will come out and say right away that I think that this album might even be a little bit underappreciated in the way that it's absolutely revolutionary. The mixing of styles on here was incredibly important to music in the time that this came about, and brought a lot of heavier sounds and styles to the mainstream. It actually impacted way more than you would think with the general music of the early 2000s especially. Popular music, especially popular rock music even more specifically, definitely wouldn't be the same without the existence of Hybrid Theory. And, that's the most unbiased positive statement I can throw its way, because everything else I would say would still be positive. It's just that I don't know if I'm the only one hearing that. So I guess I'm gonna wrap it up here. I feel like I've definitely talked more than long enough about this. Just wanted to say some good things about one of my favorites for sure. So if you love Linkin Park, Hybrid Theory specifically, anything like that, let me know in the comments section. It'd be great to hear from you all on that regard. But if not, just tell me about an album that you really love. Go ahead and just spread some positivity down there. I think we all need it. But that's all I got for you. So hit the like button if you did like what you saw today, and subscribe to the channel for more music related content coming your way. Hit the bell for notifications on that same thing as well. But that is just about going to wrap it up for this one, and I will see you in the next video.